Hello, this is Steve, your only English YouTube teacher, the only guy teaching people how to speak English on the internet. This is the second part of this video. We started last week thinking about planning different text types for B2 and C1 writing part 2. And when I was doing this, something came up that I thought would be quite useful to include, probably as a separate video because it's a bit of a different topic. It is focusing on introductions and conclusions, because I think that this is often taught quite badly in classes and in textbooks. They don't really say what makes a good introduction and a good conclusion or give you any tips or tricks for how to do it. They just say, firstly, introduce your topic, then conclude it. But what does that mean? How do we do it? That's the point of this video. So we're going to look at some examples and think about what you should include in a good introduction and a good conclusion to break it down so you've got a technique, so you know what you're doing when you're sitting in the exam writing any part of the writing for B2 and C1. So we have to start by asking, what makes a good introduction? What is an introduction? What are you trying to do? And I think there's three things that a good introduction should have that you're going to try and include in all your introductions for every text type you write about. Point one, you need to give some context. So you're given this question, you need to show that you understand the idea behind this question. Because when they write the question, the people writing the Cambridge exam, they have something in mind they're expecting you to write about, some topic, some situation. You need to show you understand that. If we'll look at an example in a minute, but if you remember, the example was about the big things that everyone wants in life, people's aspirations for in life, in terms of getting married, having a family, buying a house, right? Big things. If you were to start writing about my aspiration of getting a Chinese takeaway meal tonight, you didn't understand the question. That's why this context is important, right? Because that is an aspiration, but it's not what we've got in mind when we write the question. So you need to show that you understand, oh, okay, the big things in life. I know what we're talking about. And to do that, put it in the introduction, give us some context. Point two, introduce what you're going to say. This is the typical thing that we always see. This essay will discuss point one, point two, and maybe point three, depending on B2-C1. But you should do this briefly. Make it clear for me what you're going to talk about, because it makes it easier for me to understand and read as the examiner when I'm correcting it, when I'm marking it. So those are the two important things. And there is one more. You want to create some interest in the reader. For every text type, one of the sub-criteria for communication is, do you make the reader want to read it? Do you keep the reader's attention? And you do that by, making it interesting. How exactly? We'll look at in a minute. But like we talked about in the communication criteria, it's about being specific, being clear, using different techniques that we'll talk about. So I think these three things, context, content, and interest, those are the three things you need to remember for every introduction. Here's a little example. Remember, our question was, write an article about the big aspirations that people want in life. And here's a little sample. When to aspirations, there are some things that people would agree are crucial for a happy and fulfilling life. So I put the task in context, yellow and yellow. And we can see we're talking about things that are crucial for a happy and fulfilling life that people agree on. This was the question, the big things most people want in life. It's in the question. I'm showing in my own words that I understand the topic. I'm giving that context. These must include a loving family, a rewarding job, and a comfortable home. Boom, three things I'm going to talk about in 6 words. That's efficient. That's what we want to do. So again, in my own words, I'm saying what I'm going to talk about without saying I am going to talk about. That's a bit redundant, isn't it? Obviously, you're going to talk about it. You don't need to say I'm going to talk about, but you do need to give some indication to make it easy to read. And finally, how are we going to make this a little bit interesting? Maybe something like, let's dig into makes these things important. So I'm asking the question of why they're so important. And hopefully by asking that question, you want to continue reading to find out, why does this writer think they are important? Right? Creating a little bit of interest like that. And also dig into something, this idea of, oh yes, I want to explore it. I'm curious. So using this curiosity to make the reader want to continue reading. For an article, it's fairly evident how you do that. it is also important to do that for all the other text types, which we'll look at in a minute and which you can think about in your own exercises as well. Now you notice there's some gaps in these sentences because, as always in my videos, I want to give you maximum value for money and get as much as possible out of all these activities. So I made this a use of English part 2 activity. You need to complete the blanks with a small word that fits. Small grammatical word, as I always say. Hopefully by doing this, you will firstly pay more attention to the sentences, and secondly, maybe learn some useful phrases that you could use for these functions of the introduction like we're talking about. Complete the blanks, have a think, here come the answers. Number 1, we saw this expression a couple of weeks ago, when it comes to, a nice way of introducing what you're going to talk about. I think number 2, I said most. All people is not the most natural English. I think we'd normally say everyone. So most people is good because maybe not everyone agrees, but most people would agree. For me, right, it's my article, it's my opinion, so for me. And we're going to dig into what makes these things so important, as I said when I gave the answer away before. So that's a little bit of use of English part 2 to think about, and some nice expressions that you can use in your own introductions. What if we're writing a letter of application though? Because I'm sure you're saying, okay, that's great, and we can write something fun and interesting, but in a formal letter, how am I going to do all of these functions in a formal letter? Well, I think you really will. A good introduction will still do this. Try it yourself. Can you write a short introduction for this task, which is a letter of application for a summer job in a resort in one of these areas? Remember, we saw the question in more detail yesterday in the last video, but I think you understand the question. Try it yourself. And then here's what I might suggest, something like this. I recently saw the job for children at Beach Party Resort Fuengirola, and I would like to apply. So the context is very clear here. The situation I'm explaining, yes, I saw a job and I would like to apply for it because that is the task. I was recently on holiday in Fuengirola. Lovely place, really enjoyed it. So that's our context, very clear. You're making it like a real situation. What are you going to talk about? Well, as a job application, you're going to talk about why you should get the job. I am sure the of my social skills, abilities and English level makes me a fit for the position. And we can see here I've combined them a little bit, but I am going to talk about my social skills, my perform and my English level, because these are all good features to have in a candidate for someone working in a resort. And then I'm also trying to sell myself a bit. Right, remember the thing we said was you want to make the reader want to continue reading it. That's what we mean by creating interest in the reader. If the reader is the person who runs this summer resort and you say, I'm a great person to work here and I'm going to tell you why, they should want to read it. So it all fits together, doesn't it? This idea, like we spoke about last week, of you being positive in a letter of application and having a positive tone. This comes with the idea of creating interest in the reader, even in the introduction, hooking them, getting their attention to want to keep reading by saying that you'll be very good at this job. Oh, how will they be good? Right? They want to continue reading. As you will notice then, I've got 5 more questions here as well in my little introduction. It's use of English part 3. You need to change these words so they fit the sentences a little bit better. Pause the video like always. Here come the answers, because we are talking about a job advertisement. That's the nice formal way of saying that. Who are the people? What is the job? Well, the name of the job is like teacher, singer, footballer. We are talking about children's entertainers. It does sound best in plural as well, because we're imagining there's a few roles to be filled. One of those is for children's entertainers, and it doesn't say a children's entertainer. Number 3, there's a combination of your skills, such as performance abilities, which makes you a natural fit for the position. So a few little use of English part 3 questions there, because like I said before, we're trying to get lots of value out of everything we're learning. So that's what I would say is a very nice introduction for a letter of application. We could do the same thing for the third question that we looked at last week in our B2-C1 part 2 for the writing, where you have 3 options. Writing a review. And this time it's a series that connected with you, explaining why it connected with you. And now it is completely your turn to write your introduction, because I haven't done it. If I click next slide, it's goodbye introduction. Use what we just learned, what we just thought about. What's the context? The context is something about how popular series are now, how everyone's watching series, how they are the series that everyone's talking about, these kind of things, and how they can connect with you at important moments of your life. What are you going to talk about? Well, this is like, and obviously also in context, I think we need to say what the series is, don't we? Because that's very important context. What is the series? What you're going to talk about is the basic information about that series. So this is quite important now. Don't just say, I'm watching the series Murder Girls. Because, okay, but you need to give me a bit of information. I don't know what Murder Girls is. Is it a high school drama? Is it a comedy? Is it a horror mystery thing? Give me some basic information so I can understand what you're going to talk about. And then think about what your opinion is based on. Are you going to talk about the actors or the setting or the writing or the cinematography? Be a bit specific. And then a little technique to make us want to continue reading. Maybe a rhetorical question, maybe some interesting fact about the series that we didn't know, or a question about the series, or something like that that makes us want to continue reading. Write your introduction, post it in the comment, post it to your teacher, say what do you think, do it, that's how you practice. Right, introduction's finished. Now we're moving on to conclusions. We're going to do the same thing for conclusions, thinking about what a conclusion should do. What is a conclusion? It's the bit that goes at the end. In terms of what it should do then, I would say these 2 things are the most important. You do want to summarize your main idea, okay? That's the thing we're always taught. In conclusion, I think we should limit traffic in the city centre because it would help the environment and make it easier for people who live there. Okay, that's what you just said before. You've summarized it, you've recapped it in different words. That's good, that's important, that's fine. It's also a bit boring. That's why it's also nice to try and add a little bit extra, try and leave the reader with something interesting to think about, not just a summary of what you already said, but try and twist it a little bit, add something a little bit to, well, so the reader walks away with a satisfied feeling of, oh, yes, that was good. That was a nice, complete, coherent piece of work. Let's look at an example again. If we're talking about my article about aspirations in life, remember I was going to talk about family, work, and home. Then I might say something like, to sum up, family, work, and home are, unsurprisingly, the areas where most people focus their aspirations in life. Great, because I just wrote an essay about how people want a family to love and to spend time with, how they want a satisfying job that pays them well and that they look forward to challenging them every day, and a comfortable home to relax in and be mindful in and all these things. Then I summarized it and I said, well, that's what I just said. So there we go, finished. But we're not just going to finish with that. We're going to add a little bit to make it, to show a bigger understanding, to show our range of vocab and grammar, all those things. Of course, the true recipe for happiness is being grateful for what we already have, not always wanting more. So I've taken the question of what we want in life and like these things about that we always want, and I've twisted it a bit and given you a bigger perspective of, but what does it really mean to be happy? Why do we want these things? Just adding something a little bit to not leave it on the boring summary note. I think elevating it to the next level there, really. You can do the same thing for all these different text types that we looked at. For a letter of application, for example, we might think, yes, you're going to summarize your position. Your position is, I want the job. So you're probably going to say something like, I look forward to hearing from you soon. I am available for an interview online or in person, right? Those typical concluding phrases, which serve as a summary, a conclusion, a way of ending. But can you also leave the person deciding if you get the job with something interesting to think about? Can you make some comment about why you would be so good? because you know their company, because you've researched their company, some detail about the place you're going to work. Obviously, I'm talking about like you can do this in real life. That's what makes it good for the B2-C1 writing. If you're doing your B2-C1 writing, you might just make up some fact that you have made up about the place you're going to work. But the point is you're adding something a bit extra, not just finishing with the typical in conclusion, ... And the same for a review. Do the same thing. Give us a nice summary, but also give us a bit of a bigger perspective, a twist on the topic. Those were your 3 questions. That was your homework last week, so you should have done it by now. If you haven't, now you're definitely going to do it, because I've told you how to do the introduction and the conclusion and the body paragraphs. Well, you know how to plan it, you know the criteria. So no excuses for not practicing some writing, sending it to me to correct. You've got my email in the description, or sending it to your own great English teacher. Right, hope you enjoyed that. See you next week. Goodbye.